Did you get a little notification? Awesome. All right. Super excited for this conversation, everyone. First of all, I'm Latanya, or LT. I'm currently partner and director of scale and support for Career Launch. Excited about that. I'm also the founder of the Empowering First Generation College Students Facebook group, and also a co-founder and a current steering committee member for the Black First Gen Collective, which is a sponsor of this event today, of this really great conversation that we are going to have. I wanted to see, first of all, if we have any of the other writers of any contributors to this campus service workers book, because that's really one of the things that has inspired the conversation today. So in addition to the things that I mentioned, I'm also one of the co-editors. Let me pull a little show and tell. Ooh, 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 here we go, yay. New book that came out at the end of November, Campus Service Workers Supporting First Generation Students. It's an incredible collection. Just a heads up, though, that the current price is really the capitalist price. It's for the colleges and the libraries. And so if you're a little budget conscious, you may want to wait until the paperback comes out. The price will go down. But if you got big baller dollars, you go ahead and get a copy of the book. This is a really special book because it's focusing specifically on the maintenance workers, facilities, dining staff, et cetera, that support first generation college students, but their work often goes unrecognized. Like many of you might even let me know, like use the chat, let me know if you were supported in any way, whether you're a first generation student or not, any service worker who contributed to your success on a college campus, or even beyond. And I think I hope that's something we get at too, that we're not just talking about the success of undergraduate students. One of the things we found in this book is the ongoing success of campus service workers, whether we're in graduate or professional school, or even as staff or even faculty or playing other roles. So if that was you, please let us know, type a little something in the chat. But I'll say this as one of the editors, I had the pleasure of seeing the entire project come together. And the writers were all contributing their individual sections and pieces, and we're going to have them talk about that. But as I was seeing it coming together, I knew right away that we needed to have a special conversation about Black campus service workers supporting Black first gen students. So already we're talking about campus service workers is not a topic that's very well discussed. And then when we're talking about Black population specifically, is even more underreported. So one of our jobs here today is actually to rectify that and really honor those workers. So we really appreciate your attendance today. All right. I am joined today, super excited to have my sisters here along with me. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So first of all, Jada DaMae Anderson, who is a graduate assistant in student organization. Graduate assistant, Jada, I'm reading your bio right here. And in student organization development, did I get that right, Jada? At the University of Maryland at College Park, go Terps. And a master's in ed candidate in student affairs at the University of Maryland. So say hi, Jada.
Hi, everyone. So many of my cohort mates, my roommates, and my friends are here, so I'm so excited. Yeah, LT, you got it. I will be the graduate assistant for student entertainment events starting next year, but I'm excited for what I'm doing now.
Jada, in the tradition of many Caribbean folk, working multiple jobs all the time. I'm like, Jada, what you doing now, boo? All over the place. I love it. Love your work ethic. Unmatched. Next is Dr. Kimberly Walker, CEO of the assessment team and also Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs in the South Carolina Technical College System. Let's welcome Dr. Kimberly Walker. Say hi, Kimberly.
Hello, how is everybody doing today?
Great, great, great. Great to have you. Kimberly also is a steering committee member of the Black First Gen Collective. So shout out to you. Up next is Dr. Yolanda Wiggins, Assistant Professor of Sociology at San Jose State University. She didn't include this here, but we got to give a shout out to the DC native that's out here representing today. She's my neighbor out here on the West Coast, but we're both DC homegirls. So great to have you here, Yolanda.
Hi, everyone. Hi to my fellow East Coasters. I'm happy to be here.
And last but not least, we have Penny Seals, who's a doctoral candidate. So we're just going to claim that at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She's an associate director of academic success at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. Let's welcome Penny.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, Penny's being shy, but I'm going to bring that out of you, Penny. It's all good. All right. And so as a reminder, all of these folks here who have joined me today contributed different essays to, again, the Campus Service Workers book here collection. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I really think we should have a conversation together, right? To that I noticed many of their pieces were talking to one another. And I thought, why don't we actually talk to one another and talk about what does it mean for campus service workers to support not only Black first-gen students, but other students as well, which we'll get to. So I'm ready to kick this off, and I'm going to ask the first question to Yolanda, actually, Professor Wiggins. So Yolanda, this is a broad question, so feel free to take it any way that you want. But can you, before we do the deep dive into campus service workers, can you talk about serving Black college students in general? Like, tell us a little bit about your research, whichever way, again, you want to take that. But what is it do you think that people should be thinking about right now in the 21st century as we're supporting Black college students?
Yeah, so my work focuses specifically on higher education, race, and the family. And I've always had an interest in Black college adjustment, just for my, personal identity as a Black person moving through these traditionally white, non-Black spaces. I should say that I'm a former McNair scholar, and that's the reason why, that's literally the reason why I'm a professor today, because somebody invested in me in my progression throughout college. But in particular, I'm interested in the involvement of families in the lives of Black college students and how Black students have to juggle and balance both academic responsibilities and family obligations. And I find that students and families' involvement, they vary by social class, and they have different sets of consequences. So advantaged Black students and families, they have the cultural and material means necessary to help their college-going children and not necessarily be helped. On the other hand, I find that students from disadvantaged backgrounds, they give a lot to their families, and this detracts a lot of time from their, progression and attention and immersion in what we know as a college experience or just finishing college. So this project broadly served as the focus of my dissertation research. I'm a 2020 PhD earner. And it really started out with highlighting one perspective, and that was of Black students. But then I got to thinking, well, if I truly want to paint a clearer picture of just the different kinds of support that students are receiving or providing to family, I also should expand it and talk to other folks, family members, because the Black family is central in the lives of Black college students. So I traveled around New England. I earned my PhD at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. So I mainly traveled around Massachusetts and Connecticut, and I went to many of the homes of these 51 students that I had previously interviewed, and I interviewed their moms. And I chose to interview students' moms because Black moms have proven to be central nodes in Black families. They're connectors of kin and family members in Black families, and moms provided this second and additional angle for me to really explore just what was happening in families, exchanges of support during the time that students were in college. And then lastly, and this is where the anthology article that I contributed to really fit, I was interested in a third perspective, which was the perspective of college administrators and staff who work in on-campus offices and regularly interact with families. I had a brainstorming session with a lot of folks, and they recommended different campus partners for me to reach out to and potentially interview. So folks in student affairs, financial aid, the chancellor, university police, but they left out dining service workers. They left out custodial staff. And I should say that I'm the daughter of a service worker. My mom consistently throughout her life has worked multiple jobs in the service industry. And so I really wanted to capture these people's voices. These individuals, all of them, the staff for the third piece, I learned that they were heavily involved in the lives of college students and their families, but in many, in vastly different ways, as you can imagine. So I learned that oftentimes custodial staff, especially those who worked in a dorm where I shadowed the custodians, they know college students the most. And although this is really an informal relationship, custodial staff, they engage in so much invisible labor. They provide students with advice, they help them with projects, they care for sick students, they help students during times of crisis, when students are feeling suicidal, for example. They do so many things that isn't even on the university's radar. And so this piece of the project is really near and dear to my heart because I really wanted to find an outlet to just amplify the voices of these custodial staff, many of whom were people of color, mainly Blacks and Latinx folks. And I found that this anthology was the best place to fit my work. And then to your last point, I think it's a really good question, just thinking about like what practitioners should be paying attention to when it comes to supporting Black students. First, and something that I've been thinking about a lot, maybe this is a radical view, but I'll just point it out there. I think colleges and universities really need to be explicit in addressing their historical ties to slavery and how many colleges and universities were built by enslaved people. And to be in existence today. So they need to create a reparations fund for the descendants of slaves, rename buildings, replace statues that are still present on college campuses, not just in, Capitol squares and places like South Carolina or Virginia, the list goes on and on, Mississippi, et cetera. But they need to replace a lot of these statues with those of prominent Black folks, African Americans, and take other actions to just confront their participation in slavery. Also, they can develop new metrics for success. So stop just using numerical data in terms of admissions or graduation rates, but focus on measuring, the racial climate on campus and how students, Black students in particular, feel in terms of their sense of belonging. Train people to discuss racial issues and really train them. So provide ongoing, not one-off, one-time only professional training for faculty on how to lead effective conversations about race in their classes and for academic advisors who regularly, again, interact with Black students. Third, more safe spaces, safe virtual spaces, in-person spaces for Black students. Black students need spaces on college campuses where they can have reprieve from anti-Black racism on campus. And then I also think it's important for practitioners to really develop clear policies and procedures that outline, consequences for discriminatory treatment on the basis of race. And then lastly, I think that colleges and universities need to conduct what I like to call racial justice and equity audits across college departments, units to ensure policies and institutional practices are supporting and not only paying lip service to, but actually doing the real work of supporting racial equity and inclusion initiatives on campus. So thanks so much, LT, for that question.
Absolutely. That was amazing. I think we're all like processing all of that. And there's one thing I would love to just put, to have you elaborate on. When you said, I wrote it down, you said that the facilities workers know college students the most, right? And I think many of us could feel that. Again, I've had the pleasure and honor of reading your chapter, and you elaborate. Can you just provide like an example of two, like, what do you mean when you say that they know these students the most?
Yeah, so I guess I should say, so I shadowed, I shadowed around 5 custodial staff, and I interviewed a total of 20. They worked primarily on the floor of a first gen dormitory. And so these people were cleaning rooms to the bathrooms. They established a rapport with students really quickly and served as maternal and father figures. So they gave them practical bits of advice. When students were sick, these folks gave them things like chicken soup, for example. They helped with projects. They also alerted RAs and other, officials in the residential hall when students expressed to them that they were suicidal, that they were struggling with drug and alcohol abuse. Students confided in them because they said, and I also talked to the students a part of this floor, because they said they were non-judgmental, they were approachable, that being, they didn't have to hunt for these individuals. They made themselves available, and their presence was known. And so that made it easy for them to, continue to establish these relationships. A lot of these students, this floor started out as a first year floor. And because many of the students, they developed a community among themselves and with the custodial staff, they expanded this floor to include all years, many students. And so sometimes it's typical for students to, continue living in a dorm on throughout, their time in college, but sometimes it's not. And so many of these students, they remained in this particular dorm for the 4 years or so that they were in college.
That is amazing. I'm so grateful. We are also grateful that you were able to document this, right? This is the work that really needed to be done. When you describe the roles that these folks are playing, this is what we would expect out of our crisis response team, right? Our student support team, Res Life team, and here they are filling these roles. And yet most people just tend to think of, if they think about them at all, it's just in this cleaning function, right? So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Kimberly, I want to focus on you now to ask, what drew you to this particular project? And if you could tell us a little bit about what the writing process was like.
So what drew me to this project was really, I found myself in a mental space where I was ready to talk about things that I hadn't talked about in over a decade. And so if you will imagine with me going down the yellow brick road, but running full force ahead from who and what I was when I'm talking about my experience. It wasn't something that I was necessarily proud of for most of my life. And so if any of you have not had a chance to read the chapter, I just basically talk about dealing with food insecurity as a single mother at a Research One institution. And so I generally had the brains to be there, but didn't necessarily have the self-confidence to be there. And so there was always kind of this tension between who I wanted to be and who I really was at that time. When you put this call out, I thought about it. I was like, oh, I should write for this. And I was like, nope, I'm only 6 months into therapy. I'm not ready yet. And so I circled back a couple months later and I'm like, okay, maybe I can do this. Because I had to work through my own personal trauma and insecurities about being a single teen mom, about that time in my life, about dealing with food insecurity, about begging, a social worker to give my family food stamps, even though we had a meal plan. I mean, there was a lot that went into that. And so that writing process was really hard for me. It dug up feelings that I had spent a lot of time repressing, like physically pressing down on. Like, so I would have a memory of let's say making spaghetti, but having no ground beef, right? And thinking about like, my daughter didn't notice. She doesn't care. Oddly enough, she's a vegetarian, so she probably never cared about the times we didn't have meat. But it really weighed on my heart. And I remember physically picturing myself pushing something down so that I never dealt with these emotions and these feelings. But writing about my experience with food service workers who, quite frankly, put their own jobs on the line to make sure me and my daughter could eat, that was almost like a therapeutic experience in and of itself. Because the pen on paper, the paper isn't judging you. Microsoft Word isn't judging you. And so I had this opportunity to just put it all out there. Now I took a lot of it away. I was like, I'm not saying that in public or that in public. But it gave me an opportunity to really just talk about my experience with no shame, with no guilt, with no sadness, but just to really say, if it weren't for these three people who got me employed, who gave my daughter food when I didn't have any food, who looked out for me when I didn't have enough sense to look out for myself, I don't know that I would be here today. And that says a lot. I think it really does. And after this book chapter came out, I had so many people reach out to me and be like, why didn't you tell us you were dealing with food insecurity? What was you gonna do? You were living in Nevada. I was in Columbia, South Carolina. Or, I had that discussion with people, like, because folks who loved me found out I was struggling who didn't know I was struggling then when this book chapter came out. And that's a big part of it. You hear about people releasing books and memoirs and families falling out, dealt with all of that. And so I really had to have the discussion to say, this really isn't about you. If I came to you for help, would you have given it? Can you answer that question honestly? And some folks got a little uncomfortable because they had to be honest with themselves and say, you did ask me for help and I didn't follow through. So the process for me was therapeutic. It was eye-opening. It helped me walk with my spine a little bit straighter, be a little bit more confident about who I am, but also appreciate all the people who came along this journey with me who didn't have to, right? Like, I don't even remember this woman's name, and I doubt she remembers me, but she gave my kid food every day for a whole semester. She didn't have to do that. And so those little things along the way have just made a tremendous difference in not just my attitude about myself, but my attitude about what it means for colleges and universities to take responsibility for the success of their students.
Woo, I don't know that I was ready for all this, y'all. Ooh, Kimberly, first of all, we have to thank you for taking the risk to put your story out there. It really is a gift, everyone. I tell everyone, like, I told my mother when I sent this to her, start with Kimberly's story and then go back and read everything else, right? And one of the things my mom said to tell you, Kimberly, was how much she appreciated you putting a name to things, like, that there were things that either she experienced or she watched me experience, and that it was helpful for her. Like, it helped her see her own path or better understand my path. So again, we really appreciate it. One thing this made me think of, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, because I'm really interested in the representation of first-gen students in popular culture and media. And one popular text that came out last year was Made on Netflix, right? And one of the things I'm going to go on record as arguing is that people can really connect to white women going through struggle and white women becoming the face of the first gen experience. Wanted to get your reactions to that.
Well, I thought, no, she ain't going there. So, like, it's my brain.
You know me better than that.
When I watched Made, it made me cry. It was too close to home. It was too true. It was too obvious. It was hard to get through that movie for me. But once I got on the other side of it, what I realized is she made a more palatable character than Kim Young from 2009 would have made. I had an attitude. I had a chip on my shoulder. I was angry. There was no crying in hallways. If I had a rough day, you just got to get through life a semester at a time. Like, she was allowed to emote in a way that I don't think I would have been allowed to emote. The expectation was that I pick myself up, that I work 3 jobs, that I take 5 classes, and that I graduate on time with a 3.0 GPA. Like, that was the expectation. It's like, that's what you do. And so that movie was interesting to me because I realized that I had to get to the other side of my struggle to receive permission to take my cape off. But this entire movie, she had permission to be vulnerable, to be sad, to mess up, right? Because she went back to the fool after she got out. I don't think I would have ever been given that kind of permission in that way. But I also realized that she made a more palatable, sympathetic figure than somebody from, upstate South Carolina, looking at the nationwide. The first question people would say to me is like, well, why'd you have a baby? That's what you get. You deserve what's happening to you. And a lot of times my answer would be like, she 3, can't put her back. So we're just going to move forward at this point. But I think she made a much more sympathetic character. And I wish I had been able to receive that kind of sympathy, because that's the position of the movie. The position of the movie is sympathy, right? So it's very interesting. And on the other side of her is this rich African-American woman who's having her own struggle, who the movie doesn't allow you to have sympathy for until the last, 15 minutes maybe? And then they had to humanize her, right? Make her a great savior. It was just strange. It was like this juxtaposition of, here's this white woman that we can all feel sorry for who's going through these things. But then here's this other Black woman who's going through things and you don't have to feel sorry for her. So I really struggled with that, because truly, I see myself in both of those characters now at this stage in my life. And so I appreciate the story getting out there. I just hope we get to a point where we can have some grace and some respect and see the humanity in different types of characters who embody all the intersections of life that we live every day.
Well, it sounds like the folks who are working in food service saw your humanity, right? Were able to fill that role for you. Would you mind talking a little bit about what that relationship was like with them?
Yeah, sure. So my first encounter was actually with a gentleman, and we had like this little chicken wing station in the Grand Marketplace. And I walk up and I have my daughter in my hand. I got my bags and I'm walking up to the thing, and the guy goes, "You want some extra chicken wings?" And I'm like, "No, why?" He goes, "Is that your baby?" And y'all, I promise I almost snapped my neck. I was like, "Yes." And like, "Do you have something to say?" And he was like, "No, I just wanted to give you a little extra food." I was so defensive. Like, that was my posture. Like, I am here for a reason, to get an education, and I don't have time for the BS. And if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. But you will get called to the carpet. That man was just trying to give me some extra food, and ultimately got me a job working as an admin in the office several months later. And so he looked out for me. Like, he didn't know me. To this day, I don't know his name. I don't think I ever knew his name. He just said, "I know we're hiring in the office." It was one of the higher paying jobs on campus at $8.25 an hour. And I could get off in time enough every day to get my kid from daycare before the daycare closed. Like, that was my reality. And he saw that in me. And I just thought, that man doesn't know me. Like, he had no obligation to tell me that there were job openings, to give me extra food for my kid, but he decided to do that. And then the other young lady who used to give me food at checkout, I found out years later that she had kids that were the same age as my daughter. And so what she saw was herself walking through that line, right? Like, when you got to take your kid to places that you probably shouldn't have to take them, like, I don't know, biology finals, but you got to do what you got to do, right? And they looked out for me without knowing my name, without knowing who I was, and without ever getting a thank you, other than the thank you at the time, but not ever like some grand gesture or some recognition. And I doubt, honestly, if I'm being honest, my university would even want to give them recognition for what they did, because they would get stuck on the fact that you gave away food. And you shouldn't have done that. That bag of chip costs $1.59, and you should charge her $1.59. Like, that's the place we come from. Like, they're real big about bootstraps. And so these folks really went outside of what you could even consider the norm, and that they risked their jobs, truly, because their manager used to be walking around constantly. And if she came by, they wouldn't put any food on my plate. They wait till I go sit down, and she went back to the back, and they would bring it to me at the table. They were risking their jobs to make sure that I was fed. And I never told them I was hungry. What does it say about a person's soul when they can recognize that in somebody without even having to be told?
Woo, child. We've gone this far. We made it to 31-minute mark and haven't even addressed COVID yet. All right, but we are about to. Thank you. So Jada DaMae has a distinction of being the first person to submit a proposal for this project. So shout out to you, Jada. And Jada, I'd love for you to talk about, so you were in a unique role. You were in your piece, you're talking about being an undergraduate student, but then transitioning to a staff role, and now you're a graduate student, and your relationship with Shanitra. And I hope Shanitra would be willing to talk a little bit about your relationship too. But can you talk about your unique story and your unique relationship?
Sure. I'm so happy Shanitra is here. I was like, yes, when I saw her come in. So hey, Shanitra. So as you can see, like we're still in touch and so close, which is so nice, even though I'm all the way in Maryland. When you said we're about to talk about COVID, I was like, I bet you it's gonna be my turn. But one of the things I talked about in my piece, which was essentially just a huge dedication to Shanitra, and I could never talk about enough the impact that she had on my life. One of the things I touched on was going through the COVID-19 pandemic as a live-on staff member, working as an assistant resident director and then a resident director within the campus of UCLA. And when things were first popping off, March 2020, cannot believe it's been that long now. It feels like March 175, 2020. Like, I don't even know. The first person who checked on me and who I checked on was me and Shanitra when we weren't being provided for by the institution that employed both of us, that I previously attended, that, as LT had said, Shanitra had supplies ready for me to make sure I was like keeping my room clean, staying germ free. And I was like, oh, I ordered these masks. That was when you like still had to pay well, now you have to again, when you had to pay like $30 for masks, and everybody was like trying to make profits off of them. And I distinctly remember like we met up in the lobby, like the campus was feeling very dystopian, no one was there. And I was like, oh my God, I brought you one mask. Oh my God, I brought you this huge tub of wipes. But also touching on like something that Kimberly said, it was this thing where we had to be kind of like, oh, they can't see us like giving this to each other because we can get in trouble. Like something as like loving and supportive as like we're just looking out for each other because you, the institution, literally is not giving us this stuff when we have to come to work and be exposed to the virus every day, was just really, I think it's a thing that happens all too often and needs to be fixed. And I think for my role, especially at the time, we were tapped a lot to respond to crises, mental health crises, and just sort of like almost like the first line of defense with the pandemic, respond to students like actually getting COVID, bring them meals and stuff. But I felt like people were missing, to me, the most crucial actors in this pandemic, which was the housekeeping staff who are showing up, risking their lives every single day. And the only reason that I was tapped in and knew all the things that they were facing was through learning from Shanitra and then seeing how silenced that campus workers are. And even through like me, someone who has like a high position on campus, trying to advocate for that, the way that it's just kind of like, oh, that's not very serious. We're not worried about that. So I came to this project because I was like, that is BS. Campus service workers are the reason people like me even graduate and don't get pushed out, which is very true. Shanitra and the other Black women housekeepers are honestly the only reason that I did not decide to leave school many times. And then the university gets to turn around and be like, look at our diversity pamphlet. We graduated a Black first-gen woman student. Look at how great this looks. You should come here too. And I'm like, I graduated in spite of y'all and because of my housekeeping friends, like not the other way around. And I will admit, like in approaching this paper, I'm not even sure that Shanitra knows this. I saw the proposal call come out and I told her, we're sitting outside on the bench outside of the hall. It was the RD4 Sproul Hall. And I was like, I think I'm gonna write this essay like about our experiences together, and didn't really have much else to say besides that at the time. And then all that sort of first gen imposter phenomenon stuff came in of like, I don't have an advanced degree. I just got my BA. Like, I can't do this. Everyone else has PhD at the end of their name. And then I was like, at like midnight, the day after I talked to Shanitra outside, I was like, let me do this. Like, I'll submit it. Let's see what happens. And then just like looked up, like, as first gens do, you're just winging it most of the time. I was just like, submit proposal for paper and watch like YouTube videos on like how to do it. And then stayed up till like 4 a.m., submitted it. And then LT contacted me, I think like the next day and was like, woo, your proposal, it's so good. So glad you submitted it. Yeah, so that's why I came to this project, and I really just wanted to highlight, yeah, my friendship with Shanitra. And even in doing that, I was realizing, campus service workers have been looking out for me my entire educational trajectory. My first encounter with that, and to me it's wild that I still remember this person, was elementary school. This man named Ruben, he was the janitor who was on our elementary school, and he would always come talk to me on the playground because I was kind of like a loner kid until I came out of my shell and I am now. And he would always come just talk to me, ask about me and my family. And that continued through every stage of education. And even now at the University of Maryland, College Park, I'm a graduate student. I was like, can I bring Shanitra with me? I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know anybody here. I have a very dear friend named Curtis, who is a campus service worker in the dining halls, who first day had no idea what I was doing, was trying to go find where to get my student ID card. And he was like, you look lost. Do you need help? And helped me go figure out where all of these places were. And honestly, gave me this impromptu campus tour while he was on his shift. So again, going out of his way to help me to notice that I was signaling that I didn't feel like I belonged, that I was lost, and took time out of his day to come help me. And now I see him all the time and I'm like, hey, Curtis, what's up? And he's beloved by pretty much everyone in the student union. It's called STAMP. So I was like, oh, he has this legacy here, just this spirit that campus service workers have, and just looking out for everybody else. And I personally just think they deserve so much better than what the universities give them currently. I think they should be the highest paid employees on our campuses, and I will die on that hill. Yeah, I could ramble on and on, but yeah. Love you, Shanitra.
Well, three things. One.
Hey Jada, sorry about that. I had to unmute my phone. Hey Jada.
Oh, Shanitra, I'm gonna bring you in just like double dutch. Hang on one second.
No,
all right. First, if you all aren't watching, please watch Abbott Elementary, new show by Quinta Brunson. And there's a important custodian that's that he's a critical figure in the show. Please watch Abbott Elementary. Two, Jada, I just want to talk about how you mentioned the support you've had throughout the pipeline. So our book is narrow, we're focused primarily on college students. There's so much more to be written about the K through 12 experience and campus service workers. And custodial staff, service staff supporting students K through 12 as well. Shanitra, how did you feel when Jada said she was going to write an essay and talk about your relationship?
Hi, I'm sorry, I had to turn the TV down. Actually, I was ecstatic. Not even the point that Jada was writing about me. I was like, yes. I was like, go Jada. It was excellent. Why is this candle still burning? I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch on fire with this thing. Yeah, so when she told me that, I was just ecstatic because I was like, you go, Jada. My initial meeting with Jada, I instantly clicked with her like that. But I would feel sometimes the conversations that I would have with Jada, I felt like, okay, let me tell you the real, these masks I'm giving you, hey, they told us not to, but I'm like, well, what's the difference? If you guys are giving them to the students for free, I'm giving whoever needs a mask, well, what's the difference from a roll of tissue or one little strip of tissue? What's that going to hurt? What's that going to hurt to give her a brand new pillow if we're giving, So that was my thing. When I would sit outside and I'll have conversations with Jada, and she knows, as soon as I would see a higher up, as I call them, I would be like, Jada, as soon as they look like some weird, I would I have to go. And she's like, what? Yeah, they don't like us really talking to you, Jada, as much as they say they want us to, behave, have good communication skills, treat these students like they're your family because they're here for the 8 months. And I was like, well, that's what I was trying to do. But every time I'm having a conversation with the student, you guys will look at me kind of weirdish, make me end my conversation short. So now I'm just like, okay, I see what you guys know. You want us to basically just be cleaners, work, and that's it. And that's just not me. Jada, I would speak to everybody. That's me. But me and Jada, we had just some type of connection. I don't know if I never told her, but for me, it felt like she was like a little sister that I got to see go through this transition and graduate. For me, I never completed college, and I can admit that. I went to Everest for some little medical assistant, but that was nothing like that. So while I was there and to see that, and not just to see Jada, but like to see the other students, but when I spoke with Jada, to hear all the stuff that she had in mind, the things that she wanted to do, the goals that she was seeking, the goals that she accomplished, I was ecstatic, you know, and it just felt good. It felt good to bond with someone that I could be like, hey, you know, I talked to her, I know her, you know, that's like my little sister right there, you know, she's graduating, you know, and it just felt good, you know. Jada knows I'm going through a situation right now with UCLA, but my mindset, I'm like, I don't even want to go back. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I feel kind of belittled being there. You know what I'm saying? I'm grateful for my job because, hey, this pays my bills. I need this. I need my benefits. But at the same time, I'm sorry. Can you hold on? Is my granny calling? Oh my gosh. Let me try to. I'm sorry. How to text?
I'm so glad that Shanitra was able to make it so we can hear from her directly. Go ahead, sis. We can't hear you anymore, though. We can see you, but can't hear you. Shanitra, can you hear us? Uh-oh. We may have to. All right. Jada, you may have to send her a text. Okay. We're gonna keep going though, okay? Okay. All right. So thank you for that, Shanitra. It was so important that we hear directly from the staff and all the amazing work that you're doing. One of the themes that that Jada does pick up in her piece is this idea of surveillance of their relationship being watched not only by the other staff but also by students as well. So that it was really interesting to hear Shanitra address it right now. Another major component of Jada's piece that Penny picks up on is this idea of code switching. So even Jada, this is implicit in Jada's title, which is, hey sis, love that title. But the role of like linguistic support that comes about oftentimes amongst Black first-gen students and Black campus service workers. But Penny, can you talk a little bit about your relationships and what that meant for you?
Sure. So in my chapter, I attempted to highlight how the campus service employees, that they were just a safe place for students. And so as an undergraduate at this predominantly white institution, the majority of the campus service employees are Black. And so one of the ways that they created that safe space was through that shared language and culture, common culture that we shared. And so in the essay, I address how code switching, which is just that practice of alternating between the two languages or dialects or behaviors, and how that became a regular part of my existence on campus. Because at the time, from my perspective, it wasn't a safe space emotionally for me, particularly like in the classroom, to be my authentic self. For example, there was always a professor who would always correct the way that I would pronounce like certain words. And it wasn't the fact that he was always correcting me, but it was the way that he would do it in front of the class. And so it got to a point where I was just like, dang, I'm just not going to even say anything in class. I'll just sit here and do my work. But then that also creates another problem where now I'm the Black student who's not participating in class. And so in my experience, just being able to like chop it up with the campus service workers or talk to them and discuss about things that were going on in my life around campus. They just provided that outlet for me to be my authentic self, to not feel like consistently alienated, not feeling inferior because of the language that I was using, or not feeling like my perspectives were not validated, because I would feel like that a lot of times in the classroom. And so they just provided that safe space for us. And so and also it's the ability to not to always have to give context when you're trying to talk or explain things to people. And so not having to give that context when you're trying to engage in conversations. So now as someone who works in a higher academic setting, and I now work in the setting that the same setting that I attended undergrad in. And so in many ways, I understand like the experiences that students of color experience in this particular setting. And so it's very important to me that I try to make students feel like they belong, and take what I have learned from those campus service workers during my time there as an undergrad, and then attempt to implement those lessons in my own practice as an administrator and an educator. I also teach a freshman seminar class for students. And I just try to be intentional about being open, to be more inclusive to the languages that students bring into the classroom, just to understand that language is like intimately connected with students' histories and their experiences, their culture, their identities, and it matters. And so looking at those things as assets rather than looking at just because they speak differently, that's not deficient. Like I look at that as an asset because they're navigating multiple spaces, multiple worlds. And those campus service workers, like they just provided that for me. Not only for me, but for Black students in general, they provided that safe space for us to be able to do that.
Penny, can you tell us, like, how did you, in what way were you able to form these relationships with these employees? Like,
so I tell in the essay that I wrote, the very first time, like as a freshman, I went into the campus, the food court, and a lady who was there at the cash register, she said, "You're new, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am, I'm a new student." And so she asked me my name, where I was from, did I have any family here? And she immediately like got a piece of paper, wrote her name and phone number on that piece of paper. And she said, "I'm going to be your mama while you're here." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But just from that interaction, she then introduced me to the other individuals who were in that campus in those food spaces. And so like they would give, anytime we would come through the line, they would give us free food, send us home with like Ziploc bags to put extra food in to take to the dorm rooms. And like, I think that was Kimberly who was saying that they were risking their jobs in order to make sure that we were taken care of. And it wasn't even something that I voiced or said that I needed or wanted, but it was just, I guess they just took on this responsibility to take care of those students. They saw us as a part of their family. They realized that, I think they too realized, they knew more than anything the culture that we were kind of trying to navigate through. And so they took it upon themselves to kind of help pull us through this. And so that's kind of how I got connected.
but I don't know, Penny, you had a chance to see, and I put it in the chat. Look at the emotional intelligence it took to sense that. And someone else had addressed that too, right? Oh, Kimberly, like, didn't even know, I didn't say I was hungry, but they knew that I was hungry, right?
Yes.
People go through training to develop that type of,
Yes.
right.
Yep.
So we just need to acknowledge all these skill sets that that's what we're talking about, skill sets.
Yep. And I like the word that Yolanda used about this invisible labor that they do, and how they are helping Black students. Like one of the things that they will offer to do is take students to the grocery store, students who did not have cars, Black students who did not have cars, to take them to the grocery stores. Because of a white university and not a lot of Black, there were not many Black people, not many Black faculty or staff at that university. Where would we go and get our hair done? And so they would have their information, where to go to church. They would have their information or take us to church. They took us to a church service one time. And so just that invisible labor that makes a difference, that gives those students a sense of belonging, that they that other, like those who are designated on campus, who are supposed to be implementing those things or doing those things, those campus service workers were the ones who were standing in that gap.
And I don't want to lose sight of your initial story, though, Penny, because it was really, it's shame on the university, shame on that faculty, but I do want to go back, make sure we didn't lose sight of this fact that you felt silenced in the classroom, right? And that these other staff are providing you a space for your voice. And this was something that came up quite a bit through in many chapters throughout. I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to say about that. And as you're thinking, I also want to acknowledge something that was in Jada's piece. I'll just say Jada and Shanitra's piece is what I'll truly say. You talked a lot about like not just the language itself, Jada, but like volume, like, oh, y'all are so loud, right? So Penny and Jada, I'd like love for you to just talk a little bit more about this idea of providing voice for people. Oh, all right, Jada. Penny's talking.
Okay, I was like,
it was hilarious. It's hilarious in your piece.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm trying to. I remember, like, I don't know the exact language I was talking about, but it's like that feeling, at least for me, I would get back from campus and it was like I would go through like a different dimension. Like I'd see Shanitra, maybe some of my other housekeeping friends, and immediately, hey Jada, hey Shanitra. And I was like, oh yes, finally, like I am out of the confines of academia. Because I was a bit of I guess like a wallflower in class because of similar things that Penny shared, whether it was like I'm being corrected for my speech. And then, you know, even now I'm grappling with getting back my sense of like language and dialect in academia because it's become so jargony and like for the people in the ivory tower. Like I'm trying to gain how I just speak regularly back in my writing. But that's a whole other side thing. But it was also this thing of like, why am I called on every single time we're talking about Black issues? Or like, why are you looking at me, everybody, every time like we need to talk about something that has to do with racism? I think people who, I don't know if other people also attended UCLA here, like kind of have this idea, oh, it's in Los Angeles, it's super diverse, and it's like, there's literally less than 3% of us there at the school. Like when people are like, oh yeah, you know, everybody else who's Black at the university, like it's not hyperbole, like you know each other and everyone knows each other. And so getting back and getting to talk to Shanitra was just like this space, I don't know, for me, like it just felt really freeing. Like, you know, when you just like, I don't know, just like take a weight off, like it was like, oh, I guess you just like sit. I feel like for like a direct, I guess like not example, metaphor, I felt like I was going when I would go and get like my hair done with my really good family friend who does my hair in like a Black beauty salon. Like it was that same sensation of like familiarity. I show up like in my home clothes, like with my bonnet on. It was like that, like in a feeling, like I just felt so comfortable. And like at school, like I think I talk about it a lot more now. Like I was like, I don't have the experience that people think of when you're like, oh, you graduated UCLA, you must be so proud, it's so great. And it's like, it's because of these experiences of getting to be myself that I remember it fondly. But like my classroom experience was in juxtaposition with that. It wasn't where I got to be loud and be myself, but hanging out, kikiing with Shanitra was where I got to just do that.
Great.
Yeah, I could agree with that, Jada, because I'm sorry to even like intervene, but that's crazy because that's how I felt. Well, Jada see me hanging mostly with my coworker, Anna. And it's crazy because she's Hispanic, but that just shows like I don't segregate myself. I just go to who I, you know, it's a feeling more of. So that's exactly like when I would see Jada, I'm like, hey, Jada. And then I like always will look back because I'm like, oh man, the office is right there, you know, like, or something like that. But I'm like, well, why do I have to kind of suppress myself, you know? Like, this is me. Like, I thought you guys wanted us to be, you know, friendly, like, you know, and I would always tell Jada, like, oh my God, well, let me get up. I done seen the manager walk out, give me the stink eye. It's time to go. Like, I would hate it, but I would not care. I would still, like I said, if I could, I would still give whatever I could to help out, especially to make it easier, because that's what she would do for me. I feel like while I was at work, like if it was something I was seriously going through, if I would see Jada, sometimes I would really vent, and I'm like, wow, like how is it that I can talk to you more so about something that I should be going to the manager about, you know, expressing myself about, but everything was always taken to the wrong. I think it was like kind of misconception. Even this last incident I just had, you know, I told him maybe I expressed myself the wrong way, but that's not who I am. Don't make that define me, you know, especially for people I feel like we pass by on the daily. You know, you'll have a better idea of who a person is. And I say that by meaning if a person looks at you in their eye and they don't speak, I was always taught like to, if somebody looks at you, make eye contact, like I speak, like that's just me. But you have some managers and higher ups and they'll walk right past you. And if you don't say anything, they're not going to say anything to you. But these are the same folks that want to come discipline you. But I'm like, well, you know, I'm not judging you based off of your, you know, I don't like to say, but nasty attitude you be having when I see you. So don't, you know, so totally, I get that. I used to feel like, oh man, then I'll go from, hey, what's up, to go back and work like, hi, hello, how are you? You know, and I'm like, is this the fake me? But no, that's just who I have to be for you guys, you know, because I don't want to be misjudged and I don't want to, you know, have you guys looking at me like, oh, she's loud and she's ghetto. Well, no, I'm loud, but I don't think I'm ghetto. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Like,
That's right. You trying to be yourself, Shanitra.
That's it. And respectfully at the same time, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And we're glad that you were able to rejoin as well. Okay, I know people are going to have lots of comments and questions. I just have one more question for the group because this was actually a really important point that came up in our pre-conversation, which is going back to Yolanda's work, actually, where she was, Yolanda, I know you were observing in your research the support that Black service workers provided, not just for Black students, but they basically, I think you were the one who said like the form of allyship that they had, that they were supporting other students of color or first-gen students regardless of race. And I'll start with you if you wanted to elaborate any more on that, and then open it up to Jada, Kimberly, or Penny if you have any other thoughts about service workers as allies to non-Black students too.
Yeah, I just want to say, oh my gosh, just hearing Jada and Shanitra's interaction, that was sorry, my ears. So it's been so inspiring, just hearing that. And so just like I think all of the panelists' work, so the large majority of the folks that I shadowed, they were people of color, mainly Black, mainly Latinx folks. And I mean, we see it time and time again historically. Campus service workers have always been people of color. It's, you know, nothing has really changed. And I want to point out that the ways that they served as allies, again, not only to Black students, but supporting other non-Black students, they clearly went above and beyond their duties outlined in their job descriptions, as you know, I just nicely like learned and heard from Shanitra. And so I'm just going to, you know, reiterate some of the things that I said before. So students like actively sought out these custodians to talk to because they found them approachable, available, non-judgmental. They referred to them as mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. These people had like maternal and like paternal like qualities and characteristics. There were so many different emotional connections that they had with these students. And I remember, you know, details about students like, you know, they remember details about students like the activities they were involved in, their birthdays, how their families were doing, where they were from. But they also acknowledge, especially on this first gym floor, that being away from home, many of these students for the first time was just a lifestyle adjustment, whether students were Black students in this super white New England town, or, you know, maybe they were international students, or maybe they were white students just having a hard time. They acknowledged the different lifestyle adjustments that students were going through. And then they also served as these wellness advocates and providers of academic support. I think it was Kimberly, I mean, Jada, Penny, you know, these are, there are other people on campus whose jobs like explicitly state, and they're supposedly trained to like serve in these capacities, and they clearly weren't doing it. Again, the students, they sought out the support of these service workers when they were sick, These folks gave them suggestions on how to prioritize sleep and rest. Again, doing practical things like tying neckties, helping out with projects, staying back late at night to help with projects, and coming on the weekends. And so also talking to students who were struggling with alcohol and drug abuse and reports of suicide or eating disorders. There were countless instances in bathrooms, for example, where these service workers, they were like, hey, this is a clear sign that there's somebody on this floor suffering from an eating disorder. And there were no like mechanisms or trainings. People wouldn't know unless these people kind of like flagged it, the service workers, and they brought it to the attention of RAs and other staff whose, again, jobs like explicitly said, hey, you're supposed to be keen on things that are happening on campus. And they clearly, other people clearly weren't, but these custodial staff, they were. And again, this was for all students. They didn't just say, oh, okay, I'm going to take the Black students under my wing. They really embraced all of these students as if they were their children. And that's the language that they use.
Amazing. Kimberly, Penny, Jada, any other thing you want to throw in there?
The one thing that I keep thinking about is the unnecessary hierarchical nature of academia and how it is constructed to have winners and losers and respected people and non-respected people, or you a little less respected than the person next door. And so I can't help but think that there is some intentionality to the blindness to the roles that campus service workers play, right? I recall particularly when we started the whole border thing and locking kids in cages, and someone tweeted, the cruelty is the point. And so I keep thinking to myself, the fact that they don't exist in academic literature about the role that they play in student excellence is intentional. The gap is intentional because the way higher ed is constructed is for there to be winners and losers. And frankly, the system, right, people who benefit from the system have said, I didn't put you in this role to work in this capacity, so I don't want to see you work in this capacity. So we're going to collectively ignore the work that you do, which is why it's invisible labor. But it's not invisible to me. It wasn't invisible to my tummy. It's not invisible to these students, right? It's only invisible because the system doesn't want to see it. And so I think that there is some value to be had around these conversations where we're now collectively saying you can't keep ignoring these people, right? When you get in the room, you can say something. There's nothing I enjoy more than letting my guard down just a little bit in a meeting full of folks that don't look, think, act, and talk like me, to let them know, don't let this PhD fool you, right? And I bring it up every time I can, right? Especially when you work in quantitative data and you work with numbers. I start every conversation with every person. Every data point is a student. Every data point in the HR data is a person. And we're going to start with that and we'll go from there. But I do want to say that I think there's some intentionality to the lack of kudos and appreciation that goes out to campus service workers, right? As our institutions try to diversify, they have found it harder and harder to find faculty and staff who reflect the students on their campus or the students that should be on the campus. But the truth of the matter is, what they're really saying is, we can't find anybody for a particular role or better on my campus. And I think we should challenge that. The next time you get in a room, challenge it and tell them, you know who's really been looking out for students? Curtis. How can we make sure that students know he's a resource? How can we compensate Curtis's time for being a resource? Because he ain't gonna work for free. Why? Because I said so. Like, I think there's value in going into those rooms, letting our hair down just a little bit, and fighting on behalf of the folks that our universities collectively refuse to see.
Ooh, wigs have been snatched, y'all. I think.
Yeah, I needed her while I was at work. Where were you? Oh man, if I would have found you, they would have been like, yeah, get her out of here. Oh man, I would have come to them. Yeah, that's my problem. I'm sorry to even interrupt, but it's the way that sometimes, like, I wouldn't really know how to word things, but I would know how to professionally and respectfully get things out. so for them, I'm like, I'm not no fool just because I can't, put in the words that you guys can, but I can still express myself in a respectful manner and get my point across. Oh man, I needed her while I was on campus. I would have been untouchable.
Thanks, Anitra. So listen, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna try to like take these spotlights off, because I think this is a great opportunity for people to chime in. I think let's try to keep it a little orderly. So if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, it'd be easier if we could do it that way. But love to get your thoughts and reactions, questions to any of our guests, or let us know what even brought you here today, because there's something about this topic that was speaking to you. So we'd like to know what that was. Anyone willing to go first? Go ahead, Shanitra.
Okay, I just want to say, because I'm about to get ready to go to my grandmother's house.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate Jada even giving me the information about this, because for so long I did feel like I didn't have anyone to speak to about certain issues, certain matters. I couldn't address things like that.
Shanitra, it looks like we may have lost you. We
So
can't
that
hear.
we can. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I was just like saying, like, I appreciate it, because it was so many people that are going through the same thing as me deep down inside. And I appreciate her even allowing me to be on this platform with so many people of the same color as me, and people that, that, hey, we can graduate from college. We can, even if we don't go to college, we are still these people that are, we have a heart, we have a brain. We take pride in what we do at the same time. But I want to tell Jada before I go, I appreciate you, Jada. You never made me feel like less of a person because of my occupation. You never belittled me. And not just you, it's true. I've been around all coworkers of all colors, all students. I'm not a segregated person, so I'm very diverse, But Jada, I appreciate you so much. You made me take pride even more in my job, So it wasn't, I'm just coming to work to clean. I did look forward to coming to work because I'm like, I'm gonna see Jada, I'm gonna see certain people that I look forward to seeing. So I want to say thank you for that, Jada. And thank you guys for having me on this. Hopefully I'll see you guys again, but even if it's not at UCLA, but anytime you guys are having something like this, I would love to join.
Oh, Shanitra, you're making us cry. Get out of here.
No, I appreciate you guys. Because even through my situation with UCLA, I'm like, I was talking to Jada, letting her know, hey, Jada, my dad's trying to start this homeless foundation. Maybe that's my route to go. Maybe I need my money, don't get me wrong, but maybe I would have just been stuck in a trap at UCLA in my same position, but I appreciate Jada, because she opened me up to so much stuff, made my mind aware to you can do more things. So Jada, I appreciate you. I'm still doing my thing with the Homeless Foundation with my dad, and I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Shanitra.
No worries. Have a good one, you all.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you. Regina, I see your hand is raised. Are you able to unmute? Regina?
All right,
oh, here we go. Hey, Regina.
I was struggling. It's been a while since I used so.
I
was invited by my friend Kim, and so much of what was said resonated with me. I was a teen parent also, and attended undergrad as a single mother. And when I watched that show Made, I mean, it hit so close to home. And I agree that we aren't always allowed to be vulnerable in that way. Me and Kim have talked about that a lot, how now that we're past that chapter and we're further along and we've achieved our educational goals, now we can look back and see how much we've accomplished. But in the moment, you're just trying to make it from day to day. So the people who were there and supported me through my educational and my professional journey are just some of the most amazing people I've ever met.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a source of support for Kimberly, and kudos to all that you have accomplished so far as well. All right, there's a question from Claude Taylor, Dr. Taylor. Can the panel discuss what ways their campus are being more student ready from the beginning of a student's enrollment? That is, if they are doing that. Kimberly, unmuted first.
I was gonna say you beat me to it. I was like, are we? We're not. Is that a thing? I don't think so. The short answer for the 16 institutions that I work with is that we're not. I have to be honest and transparent and say that politics play a huge role in that. Because of the way the system is utilized to support business and industry, there is not a focus on continuing education. There's not a focus on schools being hubs for thought. There is a focus on churning out bodies so that the manufacturing industry can continue to work the dog shit out of people for 12-hour shifts every single day. That is what we focus on. And then our campuses just try to keep the students in school long enough to award them a credential. I mean, that's just the truth.
Jada, do you want to add? Jada, Penny, Yolanda?
Retweet what Kimberly said. I have like, thank you for the question. I was like not joking when I was like shaking my head. I was like, they're just not. But I have this like, I guess, dual point of view right now because I'm a graduate student and I'm a staff member of the university. And some of my like cohort mates are here, which is awesome, and they have like the same position. So it's like this, we're in this weird point of view of like we're facing the treatment that a lot of students get just from graduate students' point of view, but then also trying to like, at least in my case, I work with a lot of students, like protect them from the same exploitation that I'm facing because I know it's coming before it happens. Yeah, and I think right now at my university and the university I was at before this, there's not a genuine like authentic response to a pandemic is happening and it is affecting students in ways that are still like so understudied, or even just from like a human perspective, we're not considering everything students are bringing to the table. And there's just like hanging on to the past. I'm told constantly in my job, well, the true on-campus experiences, they have to be on campus, they have to be here. And I'm like, is it the true? Do you want to risk them dying for the true campus experience? Also, that is ableist. That's a whole other like conversation of why can't we have stuff online? But I think that's just an indicator of like where at my PWI, public PWI university is at. They're not responding to students' needs, especially in this digital era affected by the pandemic.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Jada and Kimberly. We keep hearing conversations about what will it take for colleges and universities to reopen or stay open. And a lot of the conversation is prioritizing the health and safety and wellness of administrators, faculty, some staff, students, because they were the consumers generating, the funds to keep, the schools afloat. But, custodial staff, workers, campus service workers are largely left out. So in order for campuses to get student ready and stay student ready, because they clearly aren't, it's to bring, and this is from the perspective of the folks that I wrote about, but bring college custodial staff to the table so they can formally be at the table to make administrative policy decisions that really prioritize student success, academic success, their physical health and well-being, and their safety. We really need to bring these folks, we need to compensate them for their time, and we need to really lean on their expertise because they have the inside scoop in a way that other folks who even live in dorms or serve in these official capacities, they don't.
Still taking questions. One thing I want to throw out there though, admittedly, there's a gap in our project. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, there's a gap in our project with regard to HBCUs or other minority serving institutions. So we've almost exclusively everyone's writing about their experience at a PWI. I wanted to get you all's thoughts about, are there any differences with campus service workers who, let's say, are Black and at a HBCU and supporting Black students. Any thoughts or reflections about that? Theories?
So I didn't go to an HBCU until I was working on my PhD, but there was a collective understanding that if you were disrespectful towards Miss May, then you might need to change your major because you can't be in the School of Ed and not respect Miss May. That collective, there was deference towards her. Like I remember a particular faculty member getting on us because he said, don't leave your food trash in the trash can. May has to come get this. And y'all are putting stuff in here that's leaking, that's wet. It's disgusting. There's a large trash can downstairs and you use it. There was no pushback. There were no scuffs. There weren't any side eyes or faces to be made. It was understood. And I never thought about that understanding of respecting our custodian versus at my PWI for undergrad, there was a joking manner about trashing a place. Like kids would intentionally throw stuff on the ground and say stuff like, somebody will come pick it up. And I would be like, where did you grow up? In a barn? And so I wouldn't say anything because I wasn't that person then. But when I got to my PhD program, it was very much understood. You clean up after yourself and you are respectful. And I only knew one person who ever threw anything else wet in that can again. And somebody walked behind her and was like, yo, you got to go get that bottle out and go take it downstairs. Miss May wasn't going to see that bottle ever. And I don't know if there's just the souls of Black folk. Like maybe we just understand what it means to have to do work that's continually undervalued, but wholly necessary for this institution to operate with any sort of success. And so I don't know if I can't help but think it's got to be a soul of Black folk. Like there's just an understanding. There was nobody throwing trash on the ground at A&T. Nobody. I think there's something to be said.
Takora, you've been lighting up the chat. What are your thoughts?
I attended an HBCU and I worked for several HBCUs, and I would have to agree with sis who just spoke about this, the soul of Black folks. It was just an understanding. So you got what you needed and you got that feeling that your auntie worked in the cafeteria or your grandmother made the food in the back. So you just make sure you respect everyone. And I did not get those feelings when I attended a PWI or when I worked at a PWI. So I hands down, and I just think about the experiences I had with undergrad and when I wasn't going to class, how the environmental services staff told me I need to go to class. It didn't take a professor to tell me that, we listened because we understood these are our elders. So we didn't look at them as environmental services or service workers. They were our elders because most of the time they were older than us. So the respect came from not the position they were in, but the position that they have earned just in society by their age. So it definitely was a different experience when it came to how Black service workers are revered at HBCUs versus PWIs.
Anybody looking for a thesis topic? Was one wide open on that. What I'm hearing is, as usual, HBCUs providing some level of support and being forerunners in some areas and aren't being recognized for it. So we need to also acknowledge that. Takora, thank you so much for that. You also made me, as you were talking, me, I go straight to pop culture. So I was thinking of A Different World and how important Mr. Gaines was on that show. That, he was there for retention, for Lena and for Kimberly, and like the important role he was playing for them. The fact that they even thought about having a character like that on the show tells you a lot. So yeah, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments for our guest speakers today? This has just been so uplifting for my soul. I was fighting through, I was tearing up. I was really trying to be professional and fight through it. It was, I should have said a little bit more about my own personal experience I went to a HBCU and a PWI as an undergrad. And my first experience was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. and really being connected to Mr. Stanley, who was the custodian in my building, I wanted to go back to something that that Yolanda had mentioned earlier. And for me, it was just, I'm one of these people that goes into a space and my first question and thought is, oh, who's going to clean this up? Right? Like, I'm very anxious about that. Like, when I see like all these parties and, or even graduation and all that confetti, like I'm like, oh, I'm like making sure I'm even, cleaning stuff up in my own area. So for me, it's just like a no brainer. Like, how could you not see these things? How dare you call someone by their first name? Ooh, I wasn't raised like that. I just, my mama told me, like, especially someone who's cleaning up after me, to give them a respectful title. So it's always Mr. Stanley or whoever. So this has been such an amazing space to start to hear about these collective stories, that it's not just our own individual experiences, but I was Kimberly, you and Yolanda especially, really talking about how we have to push, right, and stop settling for these definitions of student success that only uphold white supremacy, to start thinking about all the different ways, that the gap is intentional. Kimberly, girl, you got so many retweets out there, but the gap is intentional, talking about these unnecessary hierarchies. And I just want to make sure I recap some of the things that we said about campus service workers serving basically as de facto orientation and welcome staff, wellness advocates, student support, in addition to all their other roles too. Let me know what else I missed, but these are creating spaces where people feel comfortable speaking in their own authentic languages, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure I capture all that. What else was I missing? Crisis responders, mentors, absolutely. So I'm going to go each one. I'm going to go from, I'm going to go Yolanda, Penny, Jada, Kimberly to some closing thoughts. So Yolanda, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just say provide a seat, several seats at the table for campus service workers. They know students more than anyone else on the college campus or in an elementary, middle.
I think there's a little bit of lag. Okay. Who did I say was next? Penny?
Yes, I have so much. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. Particularly Jada and Shanitra, like that whole dynamic is just awesome. But definitely advocating for campus service workers in any spaces that we can, and providing that advocation and letting them know that we appreciate them, particularly in my role now coming back to the university as someone who works in academic affairs, is trying to, let them know how much I appreciate them. And then also kind of, I think like Kimberly was saying, be that voice in the room that highlights the work that those campus service workers are doing.
Thank you, Penny. Jada?
I echo what's already been shared, and I'm so glad you all got to hear from Shanitra, because she's amazing, and just wanted to shout her out because she was not prepared to speak at this at all. And I was just like, hey, come through. And then she like got to tell her story, which is what these spaces like are for. And like, I hope they continue, like we continue to have spaces like this. My mom came to this too. My mom's here, and Shanitra knows my mom. So like Shanitra truly is like part of the
Mama's
family.
here?
Like, yeah, my mom came. I think my auntie Francine might have come too. I'm
Okay,
not sure.
tell her say hi. Tell her say hi.
Yeah, I will. But I just wanted to say something that Tafora said earlier about like people with PhDs will not be able to admit that Black campus worker knows us better, can handle students better than they can. And to me, I'm thinking like, here I am like studying this, and I'm like, Shanitra doesn't know a single student development theory, but knew exactly what I needed every single day I was on campus. And that's just that. And I think that campus service workers, like I've said many times, this panel just deserve more. And as I continue in this field, I really have taken to heart what Kimberly and Yolanda have shared about just constantly bringing that up and pushing that they be at the table that I'm sitting at as well.
Thanks, Jada. All right, Kimberly, the gap is intentional.
I certainly want to echo Yolanda's point about bringing campus service workers to the table. And you will find yourself in spaces where that is highly discouraged. And when that is the case, speak up anyway. Like if you can't bring them to the table, speak on their behalf. That's first and foremost. Secondly, I want to challenge each of us to check our privilege, because we probably think like, well, I'm Black and poor, but you are probably educated and somebody is willing to listen to you because you can use the right words and the right jargon to communicate. And so I would highly encourage each of us to put on our advocacy boots every single day, even when you're not thinking about it, even when it's not at the forefront, even when you're not at work, to fight on behalf of these folks. Because not just because I was able to get through, but try to remember that this changes the trajectory of people's families, not just an individual life, but you will change 2, 3, 4, 5 generations down the road by speaking up when you find yourself at the table. So that's my challenge to everybody on this call, whether you're on the panel or not, is speak up when you can. Use your voice, be as loud as you can. And if you can't bring them to the table, speak on their behalf.
All right. On that note, I want to thank everyone for being here. Apparently, by the way, on the side, apparently the game was amazing. I'm not sure if it was over. I think it went to overtime. And so we want to thank everyone for being here today. I think I put in the chat that the recording will be sent out in case you wanted to replay it, share it with other people as well. Make sure that you at least tell your campus library, if you have access to one, to purchase the book so you can read about all the stories in completion. So thank you all again. If the panelists could stay just for 1 minute.